Welcome, curious soul, to Tales of the Tattered Book. I am your host, the keeper of the book, guardian of an ancient tome whose pages write themselves with stories that should never be told. When darkness calls and the veil between worlds grows thin, this cursed volume reveals new horrors drawn from history's bloodiest secrets and realities that exist in the spaces between heartbeats. As I open these weathered pages tonight, remember, knowledge comes at a price, and some truths are never meant to be told. Tonight, dear listeners, the Tattered Book opens to pages that smell of formaldehyde and forgotten dreams. We venture into the hallowed halls of the Natural History Museum, where the dead are given eternal life through careful arrangement. The book whispers to us of three connected stories that unfold within the same darkened halls. The tale of a taxidermist who works alone in the basement, a security guard who walks empty corridors, and the specimens that refuse to stay still. Listen carefully, dear audience, for in one night at the museum, some exhibits are still breathing. Let the story begins. The taxidermist's art.
The lion's amber eyes followed 8-year-old Simon wherever he moved in the Natural History Museum's main hall. Its mouth hung slightly open, revealing yellowed canines still stained dark at the roots. The brass nameplate read, Panthera Leo, adult male, Kenya, 1962. But to Simon, it looked fresh from the kill.
Children, gather around!
Miss Henderson's voice echoed through the vaulted ceiling.
This magnificent specimen shows us the apex predator of the African...
Simon lingered at the back, while his classmates pressed closer. The lion's glass eyes caught the morning light, and for one terrifying moment, they seemed to track his movement. Something raw reached his nostrils, a wild musk scent that had no business existing in this sterile educational space.
Simon, come closer.
Miss Henderson called.
Don't be afraid, dear.
But he was afraid. The way the lion's lips were pulled back in a silent snarl, the careful positioning of its massive paws, the too perfect placement of every whisker. It all felt too alive. Like the creature was simply waiting for the right moment to leap from its platform and resume the hunt. He spent the rest of the field trip hiding behind larger children, always keeping one eye on that golden predator that dominated the entrance hall. "28 years later, Simon Hartwell worked alone in his basement workshop at the Natural History Museum. He'd fought for this position, applied 3 times over 7 years, endured interviews with administrators who saw taxidermy as barely above janitorial work. But Simon had persisted, knowing this was where he belonged. His colleagues upstairs considered him eccentric, a quiet man who spent most of his working hours in what they called the bunker, the basement preparation room where specimens were processed. Simon was certain he'd overheard them at lunch more than once, saying he talked more to dead animals than living humans. But Simon didn't care about their whispers. He loved his work. To Simon, death was simply matter, waiting for the right hands to give it purpose. This Tuesday began like any other. Simon passed in front of the lion in the main hall. The great beast still commanded its platform, mouth forever caught between roar and silence. Simon nodded to it respectfully, like greeting an old friend. They had made their peace long ago. Downstairs in his workshop, the air was thick with tanning chemicals and preservatives. It was a small room, dominated by a heavy oak table scarred from decades of work, with a single wooden chair sat beside it. Shelves lined the walls around him, filled with mounted specimens, foxes frozen mid-pounce, a barn owl with wings spread wide, deer whose glass eyes seemed to follow his movements. Simon pulled on his latex gloves and examined the red fox on his table, a specimen that had arrived yesterday from a local hunter. He reached for his scalpel, then stopped. Coffee first. Order mattered. While the machine worked, Simon checked his phone. He scrolled to the message he read every morning. It was 6 months old now.
Don't forget dinner tonight, sweetheart. I'm making shepherd's pie.
The last message before his life changed completely. Before the people who used to think him strange for living with his mother at 42 began calling it family devotion. If only they knew what real dedication looked like. The careful rituals, the precise timing, the morning ceremonies that had slowly taken on an almost sacred quality over these past months. Every morning, the same ritual. Up the creaking stairs with her breakfast tray, toast cut into triangles, tea with 1 sugar cube, her favorite marmalade. Everything had to be perfect.
Good morning, Mum. Did you sleep well?
As usual, no answers. But Simon was used to it. She needed time now. Words reached her differently than before. Simon filled the quiet with talk of his work. New specimens, current projects, the satisfaction of bringing beauty back to what was lost.
The barn owl is nearly finished. 38-inch wingspan. Beautiful creature. You should see how the light catches in those feathers.
Sometimes her head would tilt, just barely. Simon took that as understanding. Dr. Patterson kept mentioning care services, and Simon kept refusing. Strangers couldn't give her what she needed. 3 weeks later, sharp November wind rattled the windows of Simon's house. He was adjusting whiskers on a squirrel he'd caught in the nearby park when voices echoed from the front door. Simon opened the door to find a woman in navy wool holding a clipboard. Behind her stood a police officer, hands clasped behind his back.
Mr. Hartwell? Janet Morrison, Social Services. We've been trying to reach your mother regarding missed medical appointments.
Simon's stomach dropped.
Appointments?
Follow-up visits with Dr. Henley.
The woman's voice was all business.
When she failed to appear last month and didn't respond to our calls, we're mandated to conduct wellness checks.
I provide her care. She doesn't
Simon
require.
replied.
I'm certain you do your best.
The officer cut him off before he could continue.
However, we must speak with her directly. Department policy. We have a court order if necessary.
If you insist, please come in.
Simon led them into the house. He wasn't worried, just annoyed at the interruption. Up the stairs they went, past family photographs on the walls, old school pictures, his mother's wedding photo where she wore that same blue dress.
Mom, visitors for you.
He called out calmly. At her bedroom threshold, Simon stepped aside politely.
She's been quite tired lately.
Janet Morrison entered first, with the policeman close behind. The room held its usual serenity. Afternoon light filtering through lace curtains, the faint sweetness of lavender potpourri masking subtler chemical undertones. His mother occupied her customary position by the window, spine straight with the perfect posture she'd maintained for months. The blue dress draped elegantly across her frame, silver hair arranged in those gentle waves she'd favored since his childhood. Her hands rested in eternal prayer position. The preservation work represented his finest achievement. Skin like aged porcelain, translucent yet warm-toned. Glass eyes, brown, matching her originals exactly. Gaze toward the garden where cardinals still visited her bird feeder. Her mouth held the subtlest suggestion of contentment, the expression she'd worn while listening to his daily reports about barn owls and red foxes and the sacred work of making temporary things permanent.
She's been wonderfully peaceful.
Simon observed, adjusting his glasses with steady hands.
Hardly any maintenance required once you achieve the proper technique.
Behind him, Janet Morrison's intake of breath sounded like air escaping from punctured lungs. The policeman was already fumbling for his radio, fingers clumsy with shock. Simon remained composed, centered in the understanding that this was his masterpiece, his devotion made manifest. The lion would comprehend, he thought, as distant sirens began their approach. After all, preservation was love distilled to its purest form, and love, true love, was the finest preservative ever discovered.
Chemical wisdom.
Danny Morrison checked his watch. 11:47 p.m. 3 hours into his shift, and the Natural History Museum's main hall stretched before him like a cathedral of shadows. His flashlight beam swept across familiar territory. The towering lion that had commanded this space for decades. Display cases filled with mineral specimens that caught his light and threw it back in fractured rainbows. The job paid minimum wage, but it was work. More importantly, it was work that didn't require references, background checks, or explanations about why a 34-year-old man had been fired from his last 3 positions. The museum's night security firm cared about one thing. Could you stay awake for 8 hours and walk predetermined routes without stealing anything? Danny could manage that, most nights. His phone buzzed. A text from Rico. "Payment due tomorrow. Don't make me come looking." Danny's stomach clenched. £1,500. Might as well be 15,000. Last Saturday's sure thing at Kempton Park had turned into this week's nightmare. A horse that had looked unstoppable on paper, but had pulled up lame in the final furlong. Story of his life. He pocketed the phone and continued his rounds, passing through the mammal hall, where dozens of glass eyes reflected his flashlight beam. Foxes frozen mid-hunt, deer caught in eternal alertness, a family of badgers arranged around an artificial burrow, all of them watching him stumble through another night of avoiding his problems. The basement was always his least favorite stop. Down here, the museum stored its wet collection, specimens preserved in formaldehyde, floating in glass jars like pickled nightmares. Brain tissue, snake specimens, fish heads with bulging eyes, embryos in various stages of development. The chemical smell hit him as soon as he opened the door. Sharp, medicinal, with an undertone that reminded him of nail polish remover. Danny's head throbbed. The stress, probably, or dehydration. He'd been forgetting to eat again, too focused on calculating odds and interest rates to bother with proper meals. He breathed deeper, and something strange happened. The headache eased. The knot in his shoulders loosened. The formaldehyde vapors seemed to lift the weight that had been pressing down on him for weeks. Interesting. Danny lingered near the specimen jars longer than his route required. The pike head floating in its cylinder looked almost alive in his flashlight beam, mouth slightly open as if preparing to speak. The snake specimens coiled in eternal spirals, patterns hypnotic under the artificial light. When he finally left the basement, his head felt clearer than it had in months. The next night, Danny took a longer break in the wet collection room. He told himself it was just a good place to sit without worrying about security cameras. The basement had blind spots where he could check his phone, maybe catch up on racing forms. But really, it was the smell. Something about those chemical vapors made everything feel manageable. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through tomorrow's odds at Sandown. There, in the 3:15, a horse called Midnight Runner. The name alone felt like a sign. 8-1 odds, but Danny had learned to read between the lines of form guides. This one had been held back in its last race, saving energy for a big effort. He could feel it. The pike head seemed to turn slightly in its jar, golden eye focusing on Danny's screen. Of course, it was just the refraction of light through preservative fluid. But for a moment, Danny could swear the fish was studying the odds alongside him.
"What do you think, mate?"
Danny whispered to the specimen.
Worth a punt?
The pike's mouth moved almost imperceptibly, and Danny felt, really, a whisper of agreement. Go for it. Take the chance. Midnight Runner won by 3 lengths. Danny checked his phone in disbelief, staring at the notification. He looked around the basement, at the floating specimens that seemed to watch him with newfound interest.
Care for another result?
He whispered to the collection.
Dogs? Boxing?
By the 5th night, Danny had developed a proper routine. He'd restructured his patrol route so the basement came last, giving him time to settle in properly. He'd found the perfect jar, a large specimen container at eye level, and had carefully rearranged several others around it, moving what he considered his most reliable consultants to a spot where he could sit comfortably.
Gentlemen?
Danny announced to the assembled collection, removing his cap respectfully.
And ladies,
He added, nodding to what appeared to be a preserved salamander of indeterminate gender.
I require your wisdom regarding Thursday's racing at Haydock.
The snakes uncoiled slightly, a gesture Danny had learned to interpret as thoughtful consideration. The fish heads rotated in their jars with the deliberate precision of committee members reviewing quarterly reports. But it was the embryo collection that offered the most sophisticated analysis.
Thunder Bay in the 430.
Whispered.
Check the bloodlines, dear boy. It's all about breeding when it comes to the long game.
Thunder Bay, 12-1 odds. Danny pulled up the horse's pedigree on his phone, and there it was. Secretariat ancestry, 3 generations back. Hidden in the bloodlines, just like the embryo had said. Thunder Bay paid out at 12-1, clearing Danny's debt to Rico with enough left over for a proper celebration, or at least a decent sandwich for the first time in weeks.
Magnificent work, colleagues.
Danny reported the following night, raising his thermos of tea in salute to the specimen jars.
Rico has been satisfied, and I've achieved solvency. Your insights proved invaluable.
He paused, considering.
But can we do better?
2 months later, Danny had moved from desperate gambler to successful investor. Week 1, horse racing debts cleared. Week 2, the specimens guided him toward stock market opportunities, revealing connections in tech companies and pharmaceutical shares that financial analysts missed entirely. By week 3, they began teaching him about currency fluctuations, commodity futures, the hidden relationships between global events and market movements. But the chemicals were taking their toll. Danny's skin had developed a waxy pallor that fluorescent light couldn't quite explain. His eyes held a glassy quality that made his few co-workers avoid direct conversation. Food had lost its appeal. Everything tasted flat compared to the sharp clarity of formaldehyde on his tongue.
You're looking rough, mate,
said Jeff, the day security supervisor, when their shifts overlapped one morning.
You feeling all right?
Never better.
Danny replied cheerfully.
I found an excellent investment advisory team. Very discreet, minimal overhead costs.
His reflection in the museum's glass cases might look hollow-eyed and pale, but inside, he felt more alive than he had in years. The specimens had shown him patterns invisible to others, secrets written in odds and form guides that only chemical enlightenment could reveal. That night, Danny descended to the basement with the eagerness of a communicant approaching altar. The specimen jars glowed in his flashlight beam like stained glass windows, each one containing wisdom older than betting systems, truer than luck.
Tonight's portfolio review.
Danny announced to his preserved board of directors, settling near the Human Brain Collection, the newest edition that specialized in complex financial instruments. The Pike offered lottery numbers for quick cash flow. The Snakes provided long-term investment strategies. The embryos revealed insider information about bloodlines, both equine and corporate. But it was the segmented brain that delivered the evening's revelation.
Danny,
It said in a liquid voice.
we've been discussing your career development, your transition from client to consultant, a partnership, so to speak. We'd like to offer you a permanent position with our firm, eternal job security, comprehensive preservation benefits, and the opportunity to provide guidance to future clients, night guards, security staff, anyone who discovers our services.
For a moment, clarity pierced the chemical fog.
Wait,
Danny said, reality crashing back.
this isn't... I didn't want to become...
Don't fight it!
Whispered the snakes in unison.
You wanted certainty beyond gambling, beyond luck. We're offering eternal knowledge, every market movement, every winning number, every pattern in the chaos.
Danny tried to step backward, but his legs felt heavy, waterlogged. Looking down, he saw his feet had begun to merge with the basement floor, chemical preservation spreading upward through his body like slow fire. The museum's morning staff found the basement door standing open, preservative chemicals spilled across the floor in spreading pools. Most of the specimen jars had been shattered, their contents mixing with the flooding formaldehyde in patterns too complex to be accidental. In the center of the chaos sat one new jar, larger than the rest. The label, written in Danny's careful handwriting, read, "Human specimen, night security, preserved in natural habitat."
The lion's appetite.
Tommy Fletcher, stay with the group.
Miss Chen's voice bounced off the museum's vaulted ceiling, but 8-year-old Tommy Fletcher was already drifting away from his Year 3 classmates. The mineral display had caught his attention. Crystals that threw rainbow fragments across the walls like trapped sunlight. By the time he looked up, the chattering river of his schoolmates had moved on without him. Tommy wandered through corridors that grew quieter with each step, past displays that seemed less polished than the main exhibitions. His trainers squeaked against linoleum that had seen better decades, leading him toward a section marked African Savannah, Restoration in Progress. The smell hit him first. Not the sterile museum air he'd grown used to, but something organic and musky, like the meat his mum sometimes forgot in the back of the fridge, sweet with decay, but sharper, wilder. Tommy wrinkled his nose and almost turned back, but curiosity pulled him forward through the double doors. The African Savannah Hall stretched before him in artificial twilight. Exhibit lights had been dimmed for restoration work, casting everything in amber shadows that made the mounted animals look almost alive. Zebras caught mid-gallop, their stripes flowing like water in the low light. A family of meerkats frozen in eternal vigilance. Antelope with their heads raised, nostrils flared as if still scenting predators. But it was the center of the room that drew Tommy's attention. A massive lion commanded a raised platform, surrounded by tall grass that rustled despite the absence of any breeze. The nameplate read, Panthera Leo, Adult Male, Kenya, 1962. But unlike the other specimens, this one seemed different somehow. Its amber glass eyes held too much intelligence, too much awareness. The mouth hung slightly open, revealing yellowed canines stained dark at the roots. Tommy stepped closer, his footsteps muffled by artificial savanna grass that felt surprisingly real under his feet. The smell grew stronger, that mixture of old meat and something else, something that reminded him of the zoo on hot summer days. "Hello," he whispered to the lion, the way he spoke to animals at the petting zoo. The lion's ear twitched. Tommy blinked hard, certain he'd imagined it. Stuffed animals didn't move. Everyone knew that. But as he watched, the lion's nostril flared slightly, as if testing his scent. A low rumble filled the air, so deep Tommy felt it in his chest rather than heard it. The sound a cat makes when it's deciding whether something is food or threat. "You're not real," Tommy said, but his voice shook. The lion's head turned with the smooth precision of living muscle, glass eyes fixing on the small boy standing frozen in artificial grass. Its lips pulled back in what might have been a smile, revealing more teeth than any mouth should hold. Tommy tried to run, but his legs felt heavy, stuck in grass that now wrapped around his ankles like green fingers. The savannah sounds grew louder. Cricket songs, distant hyena calls, the whisper of wind through acacia trees that existed only in this room. The lion rose from its platform with fluid grace, muscle moving under tawny fur that looked far too fresh for something that had been dead for 60 years. Each padded step was silent, predatory, as it descended toward the boy who could no longer move. "Miss Chen!" Tommy tried to scream, but only a whisper emerged. The lion circled him slowly, the way cats circle wounded birds. Its breath was hot against Tommy's neck, carrying scents of distant grasslands and fresh kills. When it spoke, its voice was the rumble of thunder across open plains.
"You shouldn't have wandered off, little one."
Tommy felt teeth. Not the yellowed fangs he'd seen, but sharp white razors that belonged to something very much alive, pressed gently against his throat.
The hunt has been quite long.
The school group found Miss Chen 20 minutes later, standing in the main hall and frantically checking her clipboard.
"Where's Tommy Fletcher?"
she demanded of her students. 23 children looked around with the vague confusion of their age group. Several shrugged. A few offered helpful suggestions about the toilet or the gift shop. But when she counted again, she could only find 23 names on her list. 23 children present. Had there ever been a 24th? The only evidence was a child's trainer, size 13, grass stains on the sole, found later that day in the African Savannah exhibit during routine cleaning. The staff assumed it had been left behind by some previous school group, though they couldn't explain why the grass around the lion display looked flattened, as if something had struggled there, or why the lion's mouth seemed to curve in a more satisfied expression than museum records showed. The nameplate, when they checked it, remained unchanged. Panthera leo, adult male, Kenya, 1962. But if you looked closely, which the cleaning staff learned not to do, you might notice that the lion appeared fuller somehow, its preserved form more robust than before, as if it had recently enjoyed a particularly nourishing meal.
And so, dear listeners, we close these museum halls as the dawn light filters through institutional windows, illuminating displays that have grown by 3 new acquisitions. The Natural History Museum continues its mission of education and preservation, though the methods have evolved. Remember, when next you visit such hallowed halls of learning, observe carefully how the exhibits seem to track your movement. Notice the way preserved eyes catch the light with just a bit too much intelligence. And if you hear whispers in the basement corridors, or catch the scent of something wild in the African savannah display, perhaps it would be wise to stay close to your group. After all, every collection tells a story, and some stories are still being written, one visitor at a time. If you dare to delve deeper into these eldritch mysteries, subscribe to our podcast, leave a rating and review, and whisper of our tales to others. Your engagement feeds the book, fueling the terrors yet to come. Until next time, and may your nights be sleepless and your dreams unsettling.